Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Okay, well, Jesse, thank you so much for joining us.
Wait. Is this our intro, Maggie?
Well, I'm about to intro him.
Yeah, we haven't even don't we normally say hi to each other?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. That's what I was going to say. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Jesse.
Hey, guys. Hi, Mike and Maggie.
Hi, Jesse.
Hey, Mike.
Sorry, Mike, you're right. It's been a little while since we've done an interview, actually. So I sort of forgot how to talk, I guess. So
I think every episode we forget how to do a podcast.
It's been
like this for almost 2 years now.
It's like that what's the 51st Dates movie?
I think it's called 51st Dates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 51st, it's always the first podcast ever. Feels like it. Well, welcome, Jesse. We are so excited to have you on. I want to share a really quick story of how you and I met, which was just a couple weeks ago. Okay, so I met Jesse a couple weeks ago at FinCon, which is a financial media conference that we were both at. And it's basically just a bunch of money nerds hanging out, to be clear. And I met him through Joel O'Leary, who we've had on the podcast, also known as 5 a.m. Joel to some people. And Joel, my husband and I were meeting up with Joel for a drink the first night we were there. And he was like, oh, hey, I'm like meeting up with my friends. We're staying in an Airbnb together. And it was Jesse and his girlfriend. And so we had like such a lovely time talking to them. And they were the first kind of group of people we met while we were at FinCon, and then continued to see them throughout the next few days. And I really enjoyed talking to Jesse, and also just the concept of kind of, I really enjoyed talking to Jesse, and also just the concept of the best interest blog that he started and his podcast, and wanted to just, dive a little bit more into learning more about Jesse and have a great conversation. And one of the things I loved, Jesse, about you and your girlfriend, I say girlfriend, but we'll get to the point that she just became your fiance a couple days ago. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll talk more about that soon. And you guys are you're like down to earth, regular people, right? Which is what I love about a lot of these personal finance discussions and meeting different like-minded people, is just having these kind of more meaningful, interesting conversations with people, and that are often on a deeper level than people that you've known forever and that you see in your day-to-day life. And so let's just jump in. I thought what would be helpful, Jesse, is can you just kind of start and tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, where you live, how old you are, whatever you want, your social security number, blood type, whatever you'd like to share with us.
Sure thing. Blood type A positive, kidneys healthy, liver healthy, all that good stuff. My medical stats are off the charts.
Nice.
So I'm told. My doctor says I'm just amazing.
We'll compare our cholesterol levels later.
Well, Maggie, it was great meeting you and Greg at FinCon. I'm so glad we got to meet. And, Mike and Maggie, thank you for having me on. A little bit about myself. I'm an engineer by training, living in Rochester, New York. I'm 31 years old. I live with my fiance and our dog or dogs. We can maybe talk about that later. And 3 years ago, I started this little project called The Best Interest. Started as a blog that really started as emails to my coworkers. We talk about money. We were all kind of lost in the world of money, what to do with our money, how to invest our money, how much we should spend, all those basic things. And I would do some research and send them emails of my research. And they encouraged me like, hey, you should publish some of this stuff. Other people want to read this. So that's how the blog started. And it's really been a cool journey, coming up on 3 years in December, where I've learned a lot, met a ton of cool people, had some opportunities come my way that I never would have expected. And it's just been nothing but fun.
Well, we're excited to have you on the show. And Maggie, like in real time, was updating me about people she was meeting in FinCon, and she's like, "You're gonna really like Jesse. Let's have him on the show." Like texting me, like as you guys are like doing stuff. So sorry I wasn't there, but I'm glad to finally meet you.
Well, good to meet you too, Mike, and hopefully next year you can make it out, and we'll have a margarita or something, depending on where it is. We'll have the local drink.
Yeah. So one of the things that we like to ask everybody is about their childhood, because there's a lot of different ways your childhood can impact the way that you approach money as an adult. So can you talk about how you were raised financially and how that impacted you?
That's a really cool question. Yeah. I'm not sure I've ever gone into detail before about it. Both of my parents were school teachers. They're both now retired, but they're public school teachers, which in New York at least has a below average salary, but above average benefits, kind of in a nutshell. And my mom actually stayed at home with us boys. I've got two older brothers until I, the youngest, went to kindergarten. So for a while there, we were a family of 5 on one teacher's salary. And then when I entered kindergarten, we became a family of 5 on 2 teachers' salary, which really means we went from pretty much lower middle class to comfortable middle class in rural New York. This isn't New York City where prices are sky high. This is upstate farm country New York. But my parents were frugal. I didn't know it at the time, right? To me, it was just the way I was raised. But they were, looking back on it, they were frugal. They were organized. They spent quite carefully. My dad did a ton of gardening, and we ate off the land a lot. Bills stayed relatively low. And I know for a fact, some of that rubbed off on me. I wasn't aware of that at the time, like I said, but the idea of frugality, the idea of maintaining QuickBooks. My dad maintained a QuickBooks budget. And as soon as I turned 22, the first thing I wanted to do was start a budget. And it's a big part of my financial journey is budgeting. So a lot of their behaviors, I think, rubbed off on me early in childhood and continue to this day.
I love your comment that when you first turned 22, the first thing you wanted to do was get your QuickBooks budget growing. That's a mouthful. Get your QuickBooks budget going, because you think about, all the different things that many, 21, 22-year-olds are thinking about right out of college. And it's not that necessarily, even though that is one of the things that can best set them up for not just financial success, but just happiness, right? Not being stressed about money. And so that is a gift your parents gave you for sure. And like you said, even though you didn't necessarily grasp all of that as a kid, it gave you some of that those foundational kind of habits and also needs. Like it sounds like you maybe grew up with similar to how I did, perhaps, in the sense that you had everything you needed, but you didn't have a lot of superfluous stuff. Right. And that, I think, creates a level of kind of expectation and happiness with the basics in life, which I think is a really nice gift to give your kids.
I agree. I mean, there were definitely times, I have specific examples in mind where as a 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 13-year-old, I felt probably jealousy is probably the best emotion of, oh my gosh, my friend has a PlayStation 2. He's got cool video games and everyone wants to go over to his house and have fun. And, we didn't have a lot of that, just like you said, superfluous stuff. My mom, to this day, she'll say, we never skimped on food and we never skimped on books. She was an English teacher. And we had tons of good food. She's also an amazing cook. And to this, my parents' house has thousands of books in it.
Yeah.
But there were other things that maybe the average 1990s, 2000s child had that we didn't, because, my parents saw it as extra spending that wasn't needed or didn't add that much to our lives, or just, go outside and play. We did a lot of that. But like you say, looking back on it, I'm thankful for those lessons and the way I was brought up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you make the point about just how you felt about other people around you, because I felt the same way in that I would see my friends with a nicer car when they turned, 16. Just the fact that any of us had cars was a great thing, right? But a nicer car, and their families would sometimes travel abroad, and that was nothing that we ever had the money to do. And I look back now and I think, I know I have way more money than my parents ever had or made, but I always joke that my kids think we're poor, and I kind of like, not poor, my kids, like, they know we talk pretty openly about money, but I'm like, I joke to them, like, I want you guys to think we're poor, right? Like, or I'll joke to other people because I think it actually instills better values in your kids. So anyways, we're getting off track, but I appreciate you guys sharing. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's very interesting to kind of hear how people grew up and how it shaped their views of money. So
yeah, everybody loves a good Genesis story, right? Every comic book, every superhero, you got to have a Genesis story. It's true.
Exactly. So we wanted to ask you some about The Best Interest, which is your blog and podcast. You talked a little bit earlier just about how it started, which I think is pretty cool. Just that it started sort of organically from you sending emails to your friends at work. One thing that Joel told me about you when I think like that night we first met, or maybe he said it afterwards, and he was complimenting you, is he said that one of your superpowers is breaking down complex money ideas into very simple terms. And I'm curious, is that something that is a very purposeful and thoughtful approach, or is it something that just comes naturally to you? Like, how did you end up kind of getting into that space and realizing that you were good at that?
Well, it's very nice of Joel to say. Joel, if you're listening, thank you. And I think the answer to your question, Maggie, is it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I think there is some innate part of me where I can point to why it's innate. And that's, like I said earlier, both my parents were teachers. And I didn't realize it growing up, but the way they explained things to me, I think they were good teachers too. It rubbed off on me. And I think I am able to explain things fairly well just by the way my brain kind of works on its own. And that continued, through college. Like I mentioned before, I was an engineering major in college, and I now work as an engineer. And after freshman year, every semester I was teacher assistanting, 1 or 2 courses a semester for the rest of college. I taught a lot in college, and being an engineer, part of being an engineer is breaking down complex things and trying to figure out first principles and how things work. So it all kind of, there's this confluence of different factors that go into breaking stuff down and explaining stuff in simple terms. So I enjoy doing it. I think I have a predilection to doing it somewhat naturally. And then as I'm writing, it takes me a long time to write some of those articles, because I'm constantly going back through and asking myself, does this sentence make sense? Will it make sense to a beginner? Where do I need more definitions? Where do I need more explanations? So some of that is certainly extra effort, or, it's a conscious effort is what I should say to follow through.
That makes sense. Do you ever have somebody read your articles who doesn't know much about this stuff? That's
a good question. Not before publishing, not usually.
Yeah.
So I won't bring in an outside editor, if you will, to say, hey, you don't know anything about the index fund bubble. Read this and tell me if it makes sense. But usually some feedback will start rolling in. And, there have been a couple articles that I've pushed out there, especially one that sticks out is about The Big Short, a fairly long article about The Big Short, not as long as the movie or the book, but hopefully does a as reasonable explanation of what was going on Wall Street. And a few people did respond and say, hey, I read it. It kind of makes sense, but I still don't understand this really big part of what you were trying to say. And I took that as constructive criticism. And basically I responded to their comment and then took my response and pasted it up into the article where it made sense to try to flesh out the content of the article.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right, Jesse. So you have 5 pillars on your website. Can you walk us through what those are, how you came up with them? Give us a little background.
Sure. Now, I'll be transparent. Some of the pillars are a little cliche, but I still think they're important. And other pillars I just really love and are really special to me. So the first one, a little cliche, personal finance is personal. If you haven't heard it before, this is your introduction. The idea is there are best practices out there that work for most people, but there are exceptions to every rule. So it's one thing I try to focus on as I say, this is what I do. This is why it's best for me. Maybe here are some reasons why it might not be best for you. So that's number 1. Personal finance is personal. Number 2, I really love money involves math and psychology. From the outside looking in, money is all about numbers. And that's obviously why math is important. But those numbers, right, they elicit so many emotions in your brain, and your brain plays such a pivotal role in your decision making and your risk tolerance and your habits. Over time, I've just grown more and more appreciative of how much psychology is important in money discussions, to the point where sometimes I'm not even sure why I should be talking about math anymore. I feel like I should only be focusing on psychology.
I've heard you talk. I can't remember who you were interviewing, but you were having this conversation in your podcast with someone. And it was about paying off their mortgage. And Mike and I are the same way. We both paid off our mortgage, and there's some financial benefits to it, which you guys talked about. But there's a lot of psychological benefits to it, which is, to me, the primary reason I did it, which I think is a great example of making a decision that is for psychological reasons over financial.
Yeah, there's this funny debate that kind of has been, it calms and then it roils again on Twitter. And it's the debate of, should you be paying off your mortgage early, or should you be taking those extra funds and dumping it into, a total market index fund? And the math would say, if your mortgage interest rate is low enough, that investing the money is probably the smarter decision. But for so many people, they say, I understand the math. Trust me, I can make a spreadsheet, but the peace of mind that I get from paying off my mortgage early, it helps me. And it has a value, maybe not a value that I can put a dollar price on, but it has a value to me. And that's that perfect example of, you got to find a balance between math and psychology that works best for you.
And this is how my brain works. I can't remember who you were interviewing, but I know that they did the math, and the cost difference was $46,000 that they sort of lost in the, trade-off of, had they did the math of, had I invested this money over this time period instead of paying off my mortgage. And they were like, and I'm fine with that. I'm good. I feel better knowing that, like, I'm okay with that quote loss as a result, which is how I feel. Okay. What are you got? So that's two. What are the other
two?
Three?
Yeah. So the third one, a little more cliche. Money isn't a dirty subject. People, you can't talk about religion and politics at parties. So they say, and right behind religion and politics, I think, is money. It's tough. You go to a party and you say, guys, just maxed out my 401k, 19,500. Woo! And the guy next to you is like, God damn it, I'm $10,000 in credit card debt. This guy's a jerk. Is he bragging? Like, what's going on? So I understand where it comes from. I understand why some people think money is a taboo, dirty subject. But hey, if we're all on this mission of financial freedom, financial independence, just making our personal finances better, reaching our financial goals, at some point we have to open up the conversation, be transparent, and actually talk to one another.
Yeah, that is a big premise of why we started our podcast, is because friends even don't talk about one of the most important topics that can improve all of our lives. We will talk about all sorts of other things, right? We will not talk about money. And it is just an interesting, like, psychological kind of, what's the word?
Like taboo?
Taboo. Thank you. It's such a big taboo for various reasons. But yeah, I love it. It is not a dirty topic. Okay. I was going to say, by the way, that's my kind of party. When someone walks in and is like, guys, I would have been like, yeah, cheer up,
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Well, it reminds me of the fact that I do have some friends who we do have really open conversations about money, partly because, they know I'm open on the blog. One of them is a fiduciary financial planner. So he works with people with money all the time. And we have some great conversations. But I am reminded of the fact that part of my goal in life and part of my mission is that I want other people in my life to feel like they can approach me with money questions and money problems, and that I won't judge them for it, that I'll help them. So I've been guilty in the past of probably being not necessarily rude, but close-minded in some way, or basically I turn people off because of something I say about money. They say, oh, since Jesse's investing all this money, I probably shouldn't tell him that I haven't invested anything ever. He won't like that. So I think
it's intimidating. Your focus on this is a little intimidating. Yeah.
Correct.
They might feel like they're going to be judged when they come to you, of all people, because you're doing so well. And yeah, I get it.
That's exactly right. So it is important to try to be like, hey, it's one of the reasons why Genesis stories actually are really useful, is to say, 8 years ago, I knew nothing. And then I spent 4 years kind of sort of figuring it out. And then I got serious for a couple years, and then I started a blog, and now here I am. It took some time. It took some effort, but at one point I was right where you are. So you can do it too, right? That's the message.
I agree. It's a lot more approachable. Mike and I actually say sometimes we've done so many things right throughout our lives financially that it's not an approachable story to other people who have not necessarily, right? And so I often am like, I talk a lot about like how I didn't start investing till I was in my mid 30s, which is one of my biggest regret. That seems to be one of the, thing that people can like kind of latch onto and hear, because it's people want to hear they want to see themselves in you, right? And think, okay, I can come from, like you said, with Genesis stories, right? I can come from where you did and I can get there.
Totally.
So I think that's really important.
Totally.
Okay. So right now, if these pillars were holding up a building, right? We're sort of lopsided. We got two more. If I can count, I think we have two more pillars.
Yes, we do. So I like this one, number 4. I think it's something that I invented one day and I haven't seen it in many other places. So imagine a fraction, if you will. And I know, stay with me, fractions, they're kind of lame. But in the numerator of the fraction, we have success. And in the denominator of the fraction, we have stress. So if we increase our success while decreasing our stress, both of those actions are going to push the fraction higher and higher and higher, right? We want more in the numerator, and we want less in the denominator. That's how fractions work. I call that your success to stress ratio. And that's something that I want to optimize in my life, and I want to optimize for my readers. I want to bring people and bring myself as much financial success and just life success, happiness as possible while keeping stress low. I think that's a cool thing to try to maximize. More success, less stress. So that might mean there's some decisions where it's like, well, you might be able to get a few more dollars if you take that route, but that route is also going to be a lot more stressful for you. So is that really going to increase your success to stress ratio? It might not. It might be more stress than what's really worth it on the success axis. Does that kind of make sense?
Definitely. And I think this is a good t-shirt market. Have you put this on a t-shirt and sold it yet?
I have not. My t-shirt options right now are limited. I actually just came out with a new t-shirt last night for Money Twitter. It says just start, which is a good message. It's a pretty pithy, very much a platitude, terrific platitude, fits right in with Money Twitter.
What is Money Twitter, by the way?
That is a good question. It is a Frankenstein monster in the most, I mean that in the nicest way. It is a Frankenstein monster of people on Twitter who talk about everything ranging from personal finance to investing to blogging, to side hustles, crypto, individual stocks, just any sort of.
So it's just the community on Twitter.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Exactly. You could call it an echo chamber if you wanted to. In some ways it is. But one nice thing about it that I will say is it tends to be very positive, which is sometimes it's positive like a cult, which is a bad thing, but it's better than being like negative, like a cesspool. Right. So yes. I'll take the positivity. It's kind of like, I mean, are you guys familiar with Think and Grow Rich? The self-help book by Napoleon Hill.
For the title, I don't think I've read it.
Yeah, well, same here.
It's one of those books that, in a nutshell, some of your listeners might be familiar with it. It's one of those books that kind of says like, as long as you think you can do it, you can manifest it in your life. I'm not
a big fan of that. I don't think things get manifested in life. I mean, I'm not saying positivity doesn't play an angle in things, but I don't believe you can manifest your way to financial independence or a new job, or I think you can work hard and be good at what you do and get better and learn. And I'm assuming you agree with your nodding.
What you just said, Maggie, I 100% agree with. I think the whole manifest movement, people are confusing correlation with causation. Where, listen, if you're a happy person, and you're good at making other people happy around you, and you're positive, and everybody sees that, well, of course, people are going to be more willing to work with you, and things probably will go better in your life. Now, that doesn't mean that the brainwaves inside your head actually cause the good things to happen, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there. My point being, sometimes the Money Twitter community gets a little bit too far in that direction. Like, just stay positive, just believe you can do it, and it'll happen.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it takes a little more than that.
Yeah, but also quit spending money on stupid shit. And it's maybe more likely to happen while you're manifesting those, right?
Correct. Okay. Long story short, the people I've met out there are awesome. And we do have a lot of cool discussions. I've learned a lot of interesting things because there's just these interesting niches and little pockets of expertise that I know nothing about. But I've met friends on Money Twitter and been like, hey, you're an expert on XYZ. I got a question for you. And next thing you know, I'm learning something from them. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I couldn't figure out how we got here. And then I remembered that Mike suggested you put the success over stress on a t-shirt. And so Mike is really like, he's always getting us off track. It's kind of like his thing.
All right. I will bring us back on track. All right, Maggie, drum roll for the fifth
pillar
and final pillar. Jesse, take it away.
All right. The fifth one, personal finance isn't rocket science, but it does need more good teachers. And as an engineer, I actually work for a company. We launch stuff into space. We aren't a rocket company. We are a payload company. So we build the stuff that goes in the rockets and goes into space. So I have an adjacent specialty. So I think I can say that personal finance isn't rocket science.
Because you figured it out and you're not a rocket scientist.
Oh, well, correct. Right. Or just because I do some rocket science at work and personal finance is
a lot easier.
Objectively easier. But the thing is, right, it needs more good teachers. And I think maybe that's the difference, where if you want to be a rocket scientist, you could go to any number of prestigious universities in the country and learn from amazing rocket science teachers. I'm not sure you can do that for personal finance. And I just think we need more good teachers like us to try to be good personal finance teachers that help people understand personal finance, just like they might want to understand rocket science.
I like those.
Thank you. So that's the classic 5-legged stool that the best interest sits upon.
I love it. So there's another sort of not a 5-legged stool, but another. What would you refer to the Foo Fighters as? Oh yeah, maybe like a principle or an accurate, some sort of founding principle of the blog. Yeah. Yeah. So you have this thing that I love it because I used to listen to Foo Fighters back in the day, still do sometimes. I love that you have some reference like, do you want to be a Foo Fighter? And Foo, FOO, is an acronym that you came up with that stands for the Financial Order of Operations. Mm-hmm. And I would love, we don't have to go through the whole thing in great detail, but I would love for you to just kind of give us a high level of what it's about, because I one of the things that I have observed in different financial and money conversations with friends and family and others and myself is sometimes people just don't know where to start, right? They need more of like framework is the word I couldn't think of earlier, right? So your Foo Fighter framework, FFF, that's another acronym for you, F cubed, whatever you can have this, Jesse. This is your property now. Get F'd. Get F'd. Get F'd. F yourself. That's a good one. The t-shirts that are going to come out of this podcast are plentiful.
Yeah. We get a royalty, by the way.
Okay. I can make that. We can make that. My lawyers will call your lawyers.
But I would love you just walk us through it, because what I love about it is it gives people something to follow and somewhere to start and begin. Absolutely. So I will say I'll start. I'll prelude. No, I'll start by saying that the Financial Order of Operations, I think I first saw it on Reddit, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I've seen it a couple other places before. I kind of made my own version of it and called it the same thing and threw it on my website. And wouldn't you know, speaking of trolls, I did have one person say, you stole that from the Money Guys. The Money Guys being this well-known YouTube channel. I think they're based out of maybe Atlanta. And they were at FinCon. I don't know if you guys know of the Money Guys. They're somewhere in the South. Anyway, so the Money Guys have their own version too. The Financial Order of Operations. The Foo Fighter reference though? No, I don't believe they did. That's your shtick, right? You got that. I think they missed out. And I got in there first. But the Financial Orders of Operations, it answers this one fundamental question. I've got $1,000. What's the best thing that I can do with my money from a personal finance and investing point of view? Right. So people say, I just don't know what to do with my money. I have some extra money. Should I be saving it? Should I be investing it? Should I be paying down debt? What should I do? And how do I know what the next best thing I should do with my money is?
So what this order of operations does, it's almost like, you know how these order of operations to help you solve a math equation. So, first you do the exponential and then the parentheses and then math and division.
Yeah.
And
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I was just having to teach my kids that.
Yep. Same exact thing. This order of operations says, well, first you want to, invest, you want to get your 401k match. Actually, I think the first thing is you want to build up your $1,000 emergency fund.
Number one is create a budget, Jesse.
Well, that's actually a good point. See, I need to get my own order of operations now.
Well, you've already done this, so you probably forgot all the steps.
I was going to say, this is the curse of knowledge where I forget what I know and I forget that others don't know it. So I will say there are different versions, but right. There are some early steps like create a budget. You got to know where your money's going. Put down a little bit of an emergency fund just in case. Secure your 401k match. Pay down your highest. If you have high interest debt, like credit card debt, pay that down. So those are 4 examples of some pretty early steps in the order of operations. And then as you get more money and as you start checking off these steps and you've successfully completed them, you can start doing things like funding your Roth IRA, paying down mid-level debt. And eventually you get to the point where you're saving for next year's vacation. You're saving for that next car. You're putting money away for months, years ahead of time. So the order of operations, it really works as a nice little introduction to personal finance for people. Just to say, you got some extra money. That's awesome. Here are some of the smartest things that you should be doing with it in ranked order.
Now, I didn't hear you add tracking your net worth. How do you feel about that, and where should that sit in the order of operations?
That's a good question, Mike. I track my net worth as part of my budgeting exercise. So in my budget, I have everything I'm earning, everything I'm spending, and every month or so, I log into Fidelity and update all my investing accounts. So my budget tracks my net worth, and I am a fan of net worth tracking, not as a point of comparison to other people, but more as a point of comparison to your prior self. Are things growing? Are things stagnant? Are things shrinking? If so, why? It's a good way to understand how you maybe can change and improve your money behavior. So I would throw net worth tracking in there with really that one of those first steps of budgeting.
Good answer.
Thank you.
And I'll just compliment the financial order of operations, because I think looking at something like that, and we'll give a link to where they can get a copy of that for free from your website, Jesse. And you've got a nice kind of PDF that walks through them in more detail than what you just did. But I think it's really helpful. And I'll give you guys a really specific example that I think is more common than many people realize. I was talking to a friend the other day, and we got into a financial conversation, which often tends to happen when I'm around. And he told me that he has about $30,000 in an emergency fund. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like in savings, cash savings. And then he was like, yeah, and I have like $7,000 in like credit card debt. But I like having that emergency fund. And I was like, cool, but that's really high interest. That's like, he's paying somewhere between like 15 to 19%. And he doesn't really think about it because he's like, oh, I just pay the minimum and I'm, like slowly paying it off and stuff. And he was just sort of like, well, but I've never known like, well, should I pay that off or should I, I like having this amount as an emergency fund. And I was like, yeah, no, you should totally pay that off, right? You will still have a $23,000 emergency fund when you're done paying that off. And you can kind of build that back up with what you had been paying on your credit card or whatever. But that's still a very solid emergency fund, given your overall position in life and everything else. And so I think often people do just struggle with like what to do next, which is why I love the, order of operations concept of giving people some direction on. And there's no like, look, whether you do number 6 or number 7 first, it's just the general idea of thinking through and having a plan for how you are going to get to a better place with your finances.
Right. That's a terrific point that I just want to drive home. Like the difference between 6 and 7 or 14 and 15 is minuscule, and you can rearrange them any way you want. It's one of those things where if someone says, should I pay off my 20% credit card or should I go buy that dirt bike?
Yeah.
That's where you want to say like, okay, let's consult the foo. Let's become a foo fighter here. And you're talking about, step number 1 versus step 87.
Yes.
Put the dirt bike on hold.
The dirt bike is not on your list of until you've done steps 1 through 10. You don't get to have a dirt bike.
Correct.
You can't have nice things yet. Just kidding.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So word on the street is you just got engaged. I have a couple of questions about your engagement. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I know we just met, but I was excited that I got to meet you and Kelly and we even heard how you met on that store also. I won't get into that. We don't have time. But first question is the easy one. There was a man in your photos dressed up in like full camo, like the army style where it looks like you're covered in like ivy and like netting, webbing and netting.
Yep.
Who was that? And what was he just stealthily taking photos? I was impressed.
So he lives in the ditch across the street from where. No, that's a good question. So he was wearing that's called a ghillie suit. So some of your listeners might know what a ghillie suit is. Yeah, it's just like you described. It's like a military sniper style suit that basically makes you look like a pile of rubbish and plants and moss.
Did he already own that, or did you?
He did not. He did not.
Okay.
So that was Kelly's brother. Kelly is my fiance. She did say yes. And that's Kelly's brother, who he's an awesome guy. And he wanted to fly in for the engagement and for the engagement party. And I was so happy to have him there. Kelly didn't know that he was flying in. And so he and I were kind of planning things quietly beforehand. And he's a hobbyist photographer. He's got some nice photography equipment. So I said, hey man, I would love if you could make it there and be our photographer. Great idea. And then it was like, well, how's he going to hide? We obviously don't want Kelly to see him. And originally I was just like, there's some trees across the street. You can probably just like wear dark colors, lay low, and you'll be fine. He said,
I like how he leveled it up. Like, I'm not just going to hide in a tree.
Exactly. And he's like, well, I could buy a ghillie suit. That would be sick. And I was like, oh, that is pretty funny actually. And so I thought he was going to. I thought he had bought one. I mentioned the day before to a friend, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm planning. Isn't that funny? And my friend goes, hey, I've got a ghillie suit. You can borrow it. And I was like, oh, cool. So I checked in with my now future brother-in-law, and he's like, oh yeah, I didn't end up buying the ghillie suit. I was like, great. Well, I've got a friend who's got one. I'll get it for you. We'll pick it up. So there was some behind the scenes logistics for me to get the ghillie suit to him, even though he hadn't landed in Rochester yet. It involved some third parties and some clandestine pickups. But yeah, so he got the ghillie suit. He wore it, and he looked like a pile of moss. I looked across the street when I got to the proposal site because I'm sitting there going like, okay, I'm about to propose in about 3 minutes. My brother-in-law is somewhere there across the street. His girlfriend was there too. She was also wearing camo. So I'm like, okay, there are these 2 people across the street with cameras and video equipment. I think I see them under that tree. That one lump there is oddly lumpy. It was not them. They were like 100 feet away on the other side of the ridge under a completely different tree. So they blended in really well, got a ton of cool pictures. And it's not a money story, but it's a pretty cool story.
That's a bit. It's money story in the other definition of money than not literal money. And by the way, I just Googled ghillie suit. You can buy a ghillie suit for like $60 on Amazon, which is good to know if I ever need one.
Totally.
Or if I'm ever in Rochester, I'm going to borrow your buddies.
Yeah.
And because we like to leave people with interesting facts on this podcast, ghillie suit, also known as a camouflaged outfit, the word ghillie actually comes from Scots Gaelic term meaning boy. And it was in reference to boy servants that assisted in hunting and fishing expeditions.
This is what people listen to our show for, this sort of useful life information.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Next time you get engaged, you're going to need a ghillie suit. All right. Let me bring this back around to money, Jesse. Mm-hmm. So on a relationship note, I'm curious how you and Kelly, your now fiance, were you always on the same page about money? Have you evolved together and gotten to the same place about money? And kind of how did you just first start talking about this with her as a partner?
That's a great question. I don't know the first time we really talked about money, but we are mostly on the same page. I know that now. And, it's probably been our money relationship has probably evolved over the last year or two. But Kelly is by nature, she's relatively frugal by nature. She's a saver and an investor by nature. Her dad gave her the wise wisdom, 10 years ago of saying, just save what you can, put away at least 10%, maybe 15, 20% if you can afford to. pick a low cost index fund, and just that's it. So Kelly's been doing that diligently, and yeah, it's paid off. Her retirement accounts are in amazing order, and I give her a ton of credit for that.
Is that what made you fall in love with her? You saw the size of her retirement accounts and were like, that's my girl.
I saw that Roth IRA sitting there and just head over heels.
Yeah.
Head over heels. Love at first sight. No, that was not what made me fall in love with you, Kelly. That was a joke. But I will say, it helps, right? It helps to know when you're in a relationship that this person is financially stable. It's not make or break necessarily, but it's one of many things that you can put it in a pro or a con column. And in this case, it's a pro, right?
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jesse, but I would maybe even say that a different way. I think it helps to know that someone is financially like-minded. So even if when you meet someone, like even if she might have been in a ton of student loan debt or something, but if she was aggressively paying it off and very focused on like the right values around money, that to me is what can be so important in a relationship. It's just that you're on this journey together and you don't have one person who's making all these, trade-offs and saving responsibly. And you've got someone else who's just spending it like there's, an unlimited source of money coming in. So I think aside from being financially stable, just being on the same page can be really helpful in a relationship.
I think Maggie is saying that she approves of your decision and you can move forward.
Oh, yes. You mean you didn't ask for my permission to take her hand in marriage, but I do give it to you. So.
Thank you. Well, it's funny. Actually, in the days since we've got engaged, I haven't asked many people for many things, including their opinions and advice. And yet they have been very freely giving me their thoughts on, especially wedding planning, which I'll be honest, some of it has been great. Like people have said like, hey, one thing I learned when I was planning my wedding is this. And I'm like, you know what, that is useful advice. But some of it's just been a little just like unsolicited fun. I have fun with it. But back on money, at least. You did not put words in my mouth, Maggie. No, that was very well said. And I do agree with that. It's about zooming out and imagining yourselves 10 years from now and saying, whatever issues, if you are, say, in medical school debt right now, are we going to be on the same page 10 years from now? Or like, are we on the same page now about where we want to be 10 years from now? That's really the question that I think is important. And in this case, Kelly and I are on the same page. I'm trying to get her to use YNAB. You need a budget. That's what I use and love. And I'm a zealot I'm a cultist for you need a budget. She does not budget at all. She's just naturally a reasonable spender.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, that's awesome. She doesn't have to budget.
There's a lot to be said for that. I'm in the same camp. I don't budget. I track my net worth. I track my expenses, but I do not budget in any way. I'm just a reasonable spender.
Yeah.
And I look retroactively at where I, maybe think I spent too much and want to, but it's more in my head. I don't think you have to have a budget to be successful.
Right. I agree. I do agree.
So Kelly, I'm pro no budget. You do your thing. Okay. We're going to wrap this up and take a page out of your book. You ask some questions that I recognize from another famous podcaster, by the way.
Ooh,
I don't know if that was purposeful, but
I've stolen a couple. Yep.
I used to ask some of these same ones. I've not done it consistently, and I like how you do it consistently. So we're going to ask you some of the same questions that you ask your interviewees on your podcast.
Excellent. Okay.
So this will be a bit of a speed round. What is the last material object or personal luxury that you spent $100 or more on?
I could tell you real quick.
Was it that engagement ring?
That was more than $100. I can tell you that much. Is that a personal luxury or is that a luxury for Kelly?
That's maybe a personal luxury for you if you want to marry Kelly.
I agree. No, that is a great one. I'm logging into YNAB right now, so I can tell you.
I hope it's a dirt bike after you were ripping on it.
I hope it's appropriate to read on the air is what I was thinking.
Honestly, the last material object I spent $100 on was months and months ago. But yeah,
what was it?
A dash cam. Just, to put on my car. So I feel a little bit better about someone not, T-boning me and then blaming me for it, which I've heard from a personal finance point of view, dash cams are pretty sound investments to make.
I didn't know that was like a thing. It's interesting.
It's a thing where just, all right, imagine you're driving one way or, you get in an accident, basically, no one's really around to see it. The intersection or whatever it happened might not have cameras. And
That's
you
a
get
great
out
point.
and say, yeah, he didn't stop at the stop sign. And then he says, she didn't stop at the stop sign, like a 4-way stop. Well, the cop is in a really tough position right there. And insurance companies are pretty notorious for basically your insurance company is going to say that other guy, it's that other guy's fault. And his insurance company is going to say it's your fault.
Yeah. Till you roll up with your dash cam footage.
Correct.
It's nice.
Yep.
All right. Question number 2. This is going to be a really tough rapid fire if we we go into all this detail.
It's me. I'm the problem.
I know. Maggie, stop asking follow-up questions. All right. What is one good habit you're trying to form or one bad habit you're trying to break?
Wedding diet.
Ooh, nice.
That's
trying to drop 15 or 20 by this time next year.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
I was going to ask you what your favorite financial tool or app is, but you just said YNAB. And I've heard you talk about it, so I know it. So let's end on one of my favorite questions that you ask. If we give you a billboard, what message would you put on that billboard to share with the world?
I'm going to need a minute or so, unless your listeners are all fans of David Foster Wallace, because what I would put on the billboard is, this is water. This is water.
Yes, I'm going to need you to explain why this is water.
Okay, so there are these 2 young fish swimming down a river, and they pass by an older fish, and the older fish says, top of the morning, boys, how's the water? And then they swim on for a little while, and then one of the young fish turns to the other young fish, and he goes, what the hell is water? Okay, right, because they're so immersed in their stream that they don't even really think about the fact that they're swimming through water. To them, it is everything that they're surrounded by. So David Foster Wallace, the late author, an excellent writer and excellent speaker, he uses this parable at the beginning of a keynote commencement address that he gives to the graduates of Kenyon College. And then he goes on to say how really it's kind of like life. Basically, this is life. Everything you do every day is life. The boring, banal stuff. You're stuck in traffic. You're in a grocery store line. The cashier's annoyed at you. Guess what, guys? That's life. And you can either choose to let it drag you down. You can either choose to get pissed off at it, or you can try to find some silver linings and some way to find joy in even the simple, sometimes disappointing or frustrating aspects of life. So this is water. Actually, listeners, if you have 20 minutes at some point the next time you're doing the dishes or something like that, go on YouTube and find David Foster Wallace's full speech. It's one of my favorites. It's an amazing speech. And I like to remind myself sometimes, this is water.
I love it. I think that is a great note to end on. We'll find that YouTube video and put it in the show notes. And I don't know if you noticed, but I was getting thirsty while you were talking about that, and I was drinking my water, hearing you talk about how this is water. We really appreciate you coming on, Jesse. I've loved many different aspects of this discussion. And I think we're going to wrap it up. We're going to put a lot of links in the show notes to where people can find you online, and the David Foster Wallace video and a few other things that we talked about, like where to buy a ghillie suit on Amazon, will definitely be in the show notes. Don't you worry, folks. But just thank you so much for coming on. We've really appreciated it.
Yeah, Maggie, Mike, thank you guys. It was a lot of fun.
And Jesse, we will see each other in person next year at FinCon.
Count on it. Already bought my tickets.
Bye, Jesse.
Bye, Jesse.
See you guys. Thanks again.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.